Hey, today I'm going to do a master copy. Now, master copying is a great way to do any kind of thing if you want to learn about how an artist works or an artist's technique that you admire. Now, you can look at work you admire by artists and you can say, well, I understand what this person's doing. They're doing this with the composition and they're doing this with their lights and darks. And you can take note of all these things and be aware of them, but you will never look at anything as critically and as analytically as when you're copying it. So copying is a great way to get right inside the artist's head. I'm going to copy this piece. I saw this piece originally in earlier this month in Milan in a museum called the Ambrosiana Museum, and I liked it a lot because it's a late piece of Rococo. And Rococo art is not really well thought of today. It's thought of as being kind of silly and fluffy and saccharine and kind of overblown and overwrought and just a lot of kind of pejorative terms. But I like it a lot because a lot of people working at this time in this genre were really dynamic, kind of muscular artists. People like Tiepolo, people like Boucher, I think you could call Goya a Rococo artist. So I like this period of work. So I always like to look at it and see what I can. And what I like to see especially are these studies. This is not a finished painting. I don't know if there ever was a finished painting, but this is the study, and I'm going to copy the study, which means I'm going to do it pretty much the way the artist did. I'm going to do it alla prima. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be blocking in my colors, and then I'll do some blending, but I'm going to get all my colors in first, because I don't want to put any paint on top of any other paint. Are you ready? All right, let's go. All right, let's mix some colors. I'm going to start with using my lightest lights and my darkest darks. Now I don't want any of these colors that are light to be totally white out of the tube, because that leaves me nowhere to go to lighten it. So this has a little bit of burnt umber in it, and this has a little bit more plus some black. Here's another super dark color, which I'm mixing a little bit thin. I'm going to put a little more white into it maybe, because again, if I make stuff super black, there's nowhere to go darker. So I want to make my dark darks and my light lights not as dark as possible. And I have a sort of little lighter version of this color for her hair. I want to block in my lightest lights and my darkest darks first, because it gives me a bracket. Like now I know what the lightest thing is going to be and what the darkest thing is going to be. So as I mix other colors, I can sort of situate them between these two polar extremes. Now once I have this information in, then I'll be able to make better decisions about how light or dark all the other colors need to be. This will prevent me from making a painting that's good, but overall too light and overall too dark. All right, so I got a sense of where my lights and my darks are going to be. You may not be able to see me too well, but I'm here. So now that I have lights and darks in, I actually have 3 tones of white. I have my light white that I mixed. It's not totally white out of the tube. And I have a slightly darker gray over here. Then I have this middle tone that I also mixed. So now now that I've blocked in some colors, I'm going to do a little bit of blending. Now when I block in colors, I do not put colors on top of each other, but when I'm blending, I do. And when I'm blending, I use the paper towel. A lot of paper towels. I cannot overemphasize how many paper towels you will need to do oil painting, because immediately my white gets very dirty from going over this dark gray. So I have to continuously add white, and then I wipe the brush. Now a lot of what my blending will be was taking the 2 colors I put down and pulling them into each other. I can go right through here, wipe the brush, taking my white, and I'm pulling it into my dark. So off camera, I did some blending on this. I blended my whites and my grays together, and I started looking at it, and I don't quite like it. This is an important skill to have. You have to be able to do things, and then look at it and say, what don't I like about this? Because that's probably how you're going to make something that's pretty adequate turn out a lot better. What don't you like about this? Okay, I'll tell you. What I don't like about it is that all of these shapes are very uniform in size. which makes this look not like soft fabric on a form, but more like a piece of engineering, like a piece of machinery, or like a radiator. If you have really consistent size folds in clothing, it stops looking like clothing. So I'm going to fix this up a little bit, then I'll get involved with doing some flesh tones. I'm doing this flesh tone just like I did the white fabric. I'm mixing a basic base color for flesh, and I'm mixing a slightly darker version, then I'm mixing a very dark version. And this is mostly how I do painting on my own projects, except that the light toned flesh color, I will mix maybe 3 variations that are exactly the same tone, but they're different in hue. I'll make one that's slightly yellower, and I'll make one that's slightly pinker. A lot of people ask me how I do flesh, and it's so distinctive because not a lot of people do this. And it's this way of using the same toned colors, but they're slightly different colors. So, but for this project, I'm pretty much going to stick with what the master did. Let's copy the master. So I went ahead and got most of my flesh tones put in. They're just simple. It's just sort of a light, a dark, and a super, super, super dark, which you're going to see like in some little detail facial features right here. And so I've got my lights and darks, my lightest lights, my darkest darks, and some sense of the skin tone. And this is a stage you get to in painting where your painting looks awful. It looks terrible. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to keep building more things. Whenever you get up and it's a new day, or you're sitting down, you're having a new painting session, you want to look at your piece and you want to say, what's the worst thing here? Don't work on the stuff that's working fine. Don't work on the stuff that looks good and makes you happy. Work on the stuff that sucks. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this dress color. Now I've mixed some colors, and this dress color is really dark. And I'm afraid I'll get it too light, or maybe even too dark. But there's a thing I can do, since this is a printout, and I can print out 100 more if I need to, I can take colors I've mixed and just put it right on here. Ooh, that looks too bright. And my dark color, maybe over here, that's also too bright. So these colors are too saturated. So I'm going to adjust these colors, then I'll get this dress area filled in. And then we'll just have to do some other little props in this wing, and then we can start to really refine the thing to the next level. Most fabric is really only 3 tones, like your t-shirt and your sheet. Any kind of fabric that doesn't have a pattern or a graphic on it is really only going to be the color where the light hits it, the color where the light does not hit it, and very little crevices and lines and drapery where there's really no light or reflected light at all. Well, we've filled in some of this detail. Let me get my shadow off of it. That would help. So I got a little bit into my face. I worked into the face with some slightly redder tones that are the same tone as our shadow color, which is kind of a grayer. And so I put in some warmer shadows. But again, this stuff is all the same tone. I'm going to fix this hair. This hair needs to be curly. And I'm going to put some kind of a thing over here. She has some kind of a bracelet thing. So I got to do that. But again, most of my detail my prop things have been blocked in. These kids need some help. There's some really weird perspective on this vase, but then there's really not a lot of information on my master that I'm copying either. It's this really high contrast, which works because it makes it look very reflective. So I'm going to do a little more work on my flesh tones, and then I'll feel pretty good about this. Now here I have 3 lighter colors that are the same tone. They're a little bit lighter tone than the light flesh I have in place. They're a little bit lighter than that. And I have some variant dark shadow colors. So let's see how this works out. So I pulled some of these colors a little more into focus. We got more flesh tones we're able to kind of flesh these kids out with. I'm not super happy with them, but I made this lovely vase a little more high contrast. The perspective is a little weird on the upper left-hand corner of it, so I'm going to cover that up with something. Again, I kind of puffed up some of my clouds, and that looks a little better. And this woman got her little bit of a perm on her hair in the back, and she was able to get a little bit more detail with her face, just having some other alternate colors that are the same tone. So I'm going to continue to work on this,
and I'll take some time lapse, or I'll just take pictures of it and talk about it. It's going to be a little bit more of a project than I was anticipating. But that means it might turn out to be kind of a good painting I can do something with.
Well, I was able to do something with it, and I had to work in little small increments. I didn't really have big blocks of time to work on this painting, but over about a week or a little more, I was able to put in a half hour or 20 minutes here or 20 minutes there, and I kind of was able to pull it into focus a little better.
So I kind of gave this woman more leaves around her hair, and that seems to be kind of working out. And I went into this sort of cape thing, and I was able to put in darker darks and kind of make the whole thing vague by kind of doing some glazing. And I did glazing of reddish and bluish colors together, and I was able to make this bracelet look metallic by putting basically really dark colors next to really light colors. So this high contrast makes this look metallic. And I put in a whole lot of tortilla chips through here, because this whole painting is going to now be about the triumph of corn. So I added a lot of corn. We have these kids here, and so a lot of this I had to darken some of these clouds, and I was able to make some of these determinations by doing a photo of it and printing out a black and white copy that I was able to look at just the contrasts. Look at my signature. It's signed, it's bona fide. It is the triumph of corn. So that kind of worked out. It was a fun little project. I'm going to do a more ambitious project next, and so I'll bring you along for the ride on that one as well. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.